Have you ever wondered how the makers of the Constitution decided what kind of country India should become? Before writing hundreds of articles and detailed legal provisions, the leaders of the Constituent Assembly first needed to answer a basic question. What are the core ideals on which the new nation will be built? Welcome to PS Choudhary. Before we begin today's topic, let us briefly recall what we studied in the previous lecture. In the previous video, we discussed the composition and working of the Constituent Assembly. We learned that the Assembly was formed under the Cabinet Mission Plan of 1946 and that its members were elected indirectly by the provincial legislative assemblies. We also saw that the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly took place on the 9th of December, 1946, with Dr. Sakhidananda Sinha as the temporary chairman. Later, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the permanent president of the Assembly. We learned that the Assembly worked for 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days, holding 165 sittings to draft the Constitution. Now the next important step in the constitution-making process was something called the Objectives Resolution. Let us understand this idea from the beginning. Before drafting even a single article of the Constitution, the members of the Constituent Assembly needed to agree on the vision of the new nation. In other words, they had to decide what kind of state India would become. Would it be democratic? Would it guarantee equality? Would it protect freedoms? How would it treat minorities? To provide clarity on these questions, Jawaharlal Nehru introduced a historic proposal known as the Objectives Resolution. You can think of the Objectives Resolution as the mission statement of the Indian Constitution. It outlined the fundamental goals and values that would guide the constitution-making process. Another important point you should remember is this. The Objectives Resolution later became the direct foundation of the preamble of the Indian Constitution. In fact, almost every word in the preamble can be traced back to the ideas expressed in this resolution. Now let us look at some important facts about the Objectives Resolution. The resolution was moved by Jawaharlal Nehru in the Constituent Assembly on the 13th of December, 1946. After discussion and debate, it was finally adopted by the Assembly on the 22nd of January, 1947. The adoption was unanimous. The main purpose of the resolution was to clearly define the objectives, principles, and philosophy that would guide the framing of the Constitution. Now let us understand the key ideas declared in the Objectives Resolution. First, the resolution declared that India would become an independent and sovereign republic. This meant that India would not remain under the authority of any external power. This idea later appeared in the preamble in the word sovereign. Second, the resolution stated that India would be a democratic republic. This meant that the government would derive its authority from the people, and representatives would be chosen through elections. This principle later appeared in the preamble in the phrase democratic republic. Another important declaration concerned the territory of India. The resolution stated that India would include the territories of British India, the princely states, and any other territories willing to join the Union. This vision later appeared in the Constitution under Article 1, which describes India as a union of states. Next, the resolution emphasized justice. It declared that the new state would guarantee social, economic, and political justice to all citizens. This ideal later appeared directly in the preamble in the word justice. Another important principle was freedom. The resolution promised freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith, worship, and vocation. These freedoms later formed the foundation of the fundamental rights contained in Part 3 of the Constitution. The resolution also emphasized equality. It promised equality of status and equality of opportunity for all citizens. This principle later appeared in the preamble through the word equality and was further reflected in several fundamental rights provisions. Another important commitment made by the resolution was the protection of minorities and vulnerable groups. It promised special safeguards for minorities, backward classes, and tribal communities. These protections later appeared in several constitutional provisions, including Article 15, Article 16, Article 330, and Article 332. Finally, the resolution emphasized the need to maintain the sovereignty and territorial integrity of India. This idea later appeared in the preamble in the phrase "to integrity of the nation." Now remember one very important fact for UPSC. The Objectives Resolution did not originally contain the words socialist and secular. These words were added later to the preamble through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment in 1976. This shows how the constitutional philosophy evolved over time. Now let us quickly revise the key ideas. First, the Objectives Resolution was introduced by Jawaharlal Nehru in the Constituent Assembly on the 13th of December, 1946. Second, it was adopted unanimously on the 22nd of January, 1947. Third, it laid down the fundamental ideals of the future constitution, including sovereignty, democracy, justice, liberty, equality, and protection of minorities. And finally, the Objectives Resolution became the direct foundation of the preamble of the Indian Constitution. In many ways, it acted like the soul before the body of the Constitution, giving direction and vision to the constitution-making process. In the next lecture, we will move forward and understand the important committees of the Constituent Assembly that were responsible for drafting different parts of the Constitution.